Can we hear me clear? All right, we're gonna begin in a second here. I just want to go ahead and take the time to ask everyone in the audience to mute or silence their cell phones or turn them off for tonight's event so it doesn't distract the candidates. We do not mind. Also, tonight's event is going to be recorded. Our plan is to have it aired on OBTV beginning Friday. Those times and all that will be communicated to the village sometime tomorrow. Am I giving feedback back there? Hard to hear? No? Okay. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you for joining candidates tonight. Our candidates, if you were not aware, for running for president, we have Bob Grasso. You stand, Bob. Also running for president is Bob Sabo. Running for vice president, we have Myrna Mills-Albino. Also running for vice president is Phil Flaker. All right. And that gets us up here for secretary. We have Sherry Bierce. All right. And for treasurer, Joe Myers. And our moderator for this evening is Gene Rapineau, as always. Thank the team for out here donating their time to have our conduct our candidates tonight. So without further ado, Gene, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over and give the rules of engagement.
It says it's good. All right, now it's good. It took a while. The rules tonight are very simple, but I'm going to reiterate a couple of things. One is because it's being taped, we're asking the audience to hold its response. No applause, no cheers, no boos, no whistling, please. For one thing, it takes away time from the candidates. For another thing, it shows up on the tape. Similarly, if you haven't already turned your cell phones on to mute them. They really show up on tape. Okay. The two candidates for secretary and treasurer are running unopposed. So we have asked them to give just 2-minute statements so that you can get a sense of why they're running and what their plans are. After that, the candidates for vice president, who are already on stage, will be asked questions. We have 3 questions for the candidates. They have 2 minutes to answer each question and 30 seconds, if they wish to use it, to extend or rebut the remarks. After that, they will get a 3-minute closing statement. At that point, we will switch to the presidential candidates. Same rules, 2 minutes to answer each question, 30-second rebuttal, 3-minute closing statement, and with any luck at all, we'll be home before midnight. Okay. That being the case, if Ms. Bierce could come to the podium and do a 2-minute presentation. Can you hear me? No. It takes a while to warm up. On now? Yeah.
Well, hello, I'm Sherry Bierce, and I'm running for Secretary of the OPCA Board. Oronoque Village recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. That was a landmark occasion highlighting the accomplishments and traditions of the last 50 years, of which we should all be very proud. However, now is the time to look forward. In the past 4 years of my serving on the OPCA Board as a district representative, I have felt a positive approach to governance, new initiatives, current expertise in facing challenges, and a what more can we do attitude. I want to support and be part of that energy. The Secretary's role is a supportive one, particularly in the area of communication. Effective communication runs in many directions. Providing timely notices of meetings allows residents to know what is going to be discussed and voted on, and thus giving them the opportunity to provide input up front through their district rep or through open forum. Clear and open communication among board members before, during, and after meetings ensures a more informed decision-making. Accurate communication of board decisions to the community helps us all live together comfortably and securely. As a district representative, my top priority was to convey accurate information as to processes and details of any board decision. In addition, I see the role of secretary as a means of providing support to the districts. Myrna started an election training program for district secretaries. That was very valuable, and I plan to continue it. I may also help by assisting district reps in how they communicate board news to their communities. But key is that I will be open to whatever district reps feel will be of most helpful to them. Communication is key for a thriving community, and I believe I can effectively contribute to Oronoque Village in that way. Thank you.
Mr. Myers.
Hi, my name is Joe Myers, and I'm one of the new residents here in the community. And I've had the pleasure and privilege of serving on the Finance Committee with Ken Coleman for the last year. And I want to run for treasurer to add to continuity to that program, because, ladies and gentlemen, experience matters. I myself have been president of 2 other condominium boards, and I'm a financial professional. And I think it's important that we have the continuity with our financial program right now to continue planning for the future. One of the things that we hope to accomplish with the Finance Committee is coming up with a 5-year plan that will address both all our maintenance issues and work to have a positive result for the homeowners. All the siding has been done now, the cycle is completed, and now we're going to go into a preventive program where I understand we're going to stain the homes, and you know, it's going to save a lot of money, and I believe that we can, in conjunction with the board, address that issue and keep up the proper maintenance on a regular basis in coordination with Mark Radigan. The elephant in the room that I have to address real fast is everybody asks me about reserves. And all I can say is when we see our financial statement and you see the gap, generally accounted accounting practice, we have sufficient reserves right now, but we need to address what the future represents. And I want to do that in conjunction with the board and the executive management. I stopped.
Thank you. Now for the vice presidential candidates. It should go without saying that we're asking you to remain seated because that's what the microphones are. You will get a 30-second warning when you're within 30 seconds of your closing, a 15-second warning, and a stop sign. If you are in the middle of a word, I will let you continue. By luck of the draw, and this was a coin toss, I believe, Mr. Flaker, you get the first question first.
Evidently, yeah.
Okay. And it is, what specific experience do you think best qualifies you to serve in the position of vice president?
Specifically, we've been owners here for quite a while, but we also owned a condo in Maui where we lived for most of the year till it burned. But what I think that I can offer to our community is my experience having been on the board there 10 years, helping to set reserves and handling insurance matters. I got 50 years in the insurance industry that I can lend so I can not pay something I'm familiar with, community I'd like. I really want this community to do well. And I think this is a thing I could do with my qualifications. I also have a master's and a bachelor's degree.
All right, Ms. Albino.
Well, aside from my 30 years experience at IBM and 10 more years in other major corporations managing portfolios as large as $20 million, I've also been on not-for-profit boards, education boards, youth commission in Monroe, etc., for another 20. Those are really important things, and I learned a lot. My skills were really honed there. But I think what makes me the most experienced today here is the fact that I led the strategic planning effort, because that really took a look at Oronoque Village end to end. And I know that if needed, that I could step in and cover Bob at a moment's notice if he needs me. Thanks.
Audience. What did I ask?
No clapping.
Please hold that applause. Mr. Flaker, do you wish to extend a rebut?
No, I think we have really similar ideas about what should be in our community, which is progress and just living in a good community. I think I can't argue about anything other than that.
Ms. Albino, anything further?
I agree. I think that Phil is definitely coming in with the right mindset, a desire to serve. And I think there are lots of opportunities where he can do so that he can get ready for a future position on the AQUA board.
Oh yeah, next year.
Next question goes to Ms. Albino first. In serving as vice president, how can you best support the president and the executive board?
Well, first I'm going to continue driving the strategic planning initiatives. Those are critical. I just completed one around social engagement, transferred it over to two really lovely ladies, Sarah Newell and Kathy Lukens, and they've already created a proposal for an optimal new resident experience and conducted a pilot event to just see the feedback. I'm really grateful that they did that, and now I'm going to be turning my attention to grants. I think we really want to accelerate that and gain some real traction.
Mr. Flaker?
Yeah, I hopefully can be of good support to a president because I have knowledge that I can implement for him. Or, well, yeah, him, it's two hims. As vice president, in the past board I served on, that's basically what I did, was to fill in where people needed it, have the knowledge and the willingness to do that on committees or helping to get things moving. And I have to agree, I mean, we just have to be able to support the leader of our service in any way that we can, and I would like to just offer to them what abilities I do have and my desire to help. That's all.
Okay. Ms. Albino, anything further?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Flaker, anything further?
I don't think so.
All right, thank you both. Next question goes to Mr. Flaker first.
Okay.
What specific initiatives do you have in mind for the betterment of Oronoque Village if you serve as vice president?
Well, the initiatives really are not something I'm looking to do anything but support. I think I would like to see more involvement of all residents, if possible, in meetings like this, but in maybe more than one meeting a year. And set up some way for residents to make contact with the board and get their ideas known as well as what we tell them. Everybody has something to offer, I think.
All right, Ms. Albino?
As Vice President, I want to support many of the initiatives already underway. For example, the reserve reviews, the documentation of the process around them, how we use those funds, how we define each fund. I think that is critical. It isn't so much in my mind that we have a failure in our reserves. Instead, it's a lack of organization around them. I mean, our office has done a great job managing it. I think the board now has a responsibility to refine it and make it more structured. I also have a special place in my heart for social engagement. I have heard repeatedly how difficult it is for some residents to come in because we pride ourselves on having this great social environment here. The problem is we have our relations already built, and therefore it's difficult to break in. It's more difficult because of social media. In the old days, we used to knock on our neighbor's door and get information. Today, we have to, we use social media, and that prevents that one-on-one interaction.
All right, Mr. Flager, anything to extend or rebut?
No, I tend to agree with it. I think it's so important for all residents to feel they can be involved and put their 2 cents in. It's good to have access, and having more and more social gatherings would be great. It may not be as easy as you think, but worth trying.
All right, anything further, Ms. Albino?
No rebuttal.
Okay, thank you both. We now get to your closing statements. Look at the draw, Ms. Albino.
So I've been asked, why is prior OPCA experience so important to consider in this year's OPCA elections? And here's how I answer that. Ours is a self-managed association, and the OPCA board has primary responsibility for managing this community, whose total assets total more than $350 million. It is hard work, and I know this for a fact because I've spent the last 4 years doing that hard work. We have a terrific executive director, and he deserves clear strategic direction and support from us to manage our operations within the budget we set. The people we elect must prove they're able to do that, despite the challenges faced, which today includes labor shortages and inflation. Just a few years ago, the challenges included a pandemic and the transition to a new executive director, and we successfully handled them. 3 of the candidates before you today were actively involved in doing so, and that's what I hope you consider when deciding whom to vote for. In addition, we experienced firsthand in 2022 the disruption caused by an unprepared vice president who unexpectedly took on the role of president. It took the first year of Bob Grosso's term to get us back on track. We do not want a repeat of that experience, and it wouldn't happen if I'm elected, because after working 4 years on OPCA matters, I'm more than capable of stepping in to cover if Bob needs me. Think of all that the OPCA board under Bob Grosso's leadership has accomplished. Despite that disruption, and know that Sherry, Joe, and I, along with many others who have served on the boards and standing committees, have played important parts in realizing those achievements. That experience matters. We accomplished this because we have a vision that we created through the strategic planning effort that I led. Strategic planning is all about identifying where we want to go and determining how best to get there. We have documented that plan and shared it with you many months ago. It clearly describes a vision that we're in the process of realizing, and we have gotten good traction. New ideas are wonderful, and new ideas are welcome, but one doesn't have to be president or vice president to bring them. However, I am a big fan of Stephen Covey, who urges that we seek first to understand, then to be understood. This can happen only by getting involved in the work underway to gain that understanding before attempting to take the reins and change course. I ask you to please elect Bob, Sherry, Joe, and me so that we can keep the momentum going.
Thank you. Mr. Flaker?
Thank you. I don't have a lot to disagree with you on, other than I think I could do it better. But I think that the experience I've had in business and in running a previous community could be of use, and I certainly can support Bob, and I will continue to do so, whatever position I'm in. I think I have some ideas of value to give, and I'm going to give them one way or the other. So I hope you'll consider voting for me. I have the qualifications. I have a lot of experience in the administration of an association like this, having served as vice president on one and handled a lot of the financial difficulties, and had to finish our insurance claim because those of you that don't know, our old home burnt to the ground in the Maui fires. So we had a bit we had to deal with. So now you're stuck with us for a few years here in winter too. What can I tell you? But we've always liked this community, and I certainly want to do all I can to help it to move along. I think I have the administrative skills to be a good assistant to our president.
Thank you. Thank you to both VP candidates. We now turn to the presidential candidates. Again, same rules. 2 minutes for each question, 30 seconds for rebuttal, 3-minute close. I should say that one of the rules we had was that I will not ask a question that cannot be answered by both candidates, because you're here to compare them. However, we did get one set of questions which can each be answered only by one. If that happens, and if there's time before the closing statements, I'll ask it, but I'm reluctant. That being said, by luck of the coin toss, Mr. Grasso gets the first question first, and it would be, what would be your 3 to 5 year financial plan in terms of costs, venues, debt contingencies, and risk?
Well, the main thing that we want to do in terms of goals is we want to take advantage of the reserve study that we got, the status of that, and take a look at the roof plan, tie that in, and also bring in some of the maintenance inefficiencies and try to make them better. So overall, the 3 to 5 year plan that we have, actually it's a 5-year plan, will incorporate all those elements for the next 5 years.
All right. Mr. Sable?
Okay, we're on. Can you hear me back there? Yeah, one of the things I suggested in the note I put out in my email was just that, a 5-year plan. To look at revenues, expenditures. When I was a town manager in New Jersey, one of the first things I did was go in, look at revenues, expenditures, bond proceeds, bond costs, and so on, and project that out. One of the reasons was to stabilize the tax rate, just like we want to stabilize the homeowner's fee and the OBTD tax rate. We don't want spikes and valleys. We want to basically look 5 years ahead and stabilize it. So I think that's a good idea. My question is, why wasn't it done before? I mean, if you look at the Community Associations Institute Financial Best Practices Guidelines, they recommend that, right? They recommend looking out and doing a projection on all costs, expenses, revenues, and so on, with certain assumptions that you can change every year depending on what happens, to really give some financial picture. An example is we funded Freeman's Brook project, a necessary project, don't get me wrong. We had to fund that out of operating costs. That's a capital project. The other thing you can read in some of the literature on best practices, and it was in our reserve study, was that you don't use operating money for capital projects. You basically have to anticipate that. Now, I'm not saying you can anticipate everything, but I think it's important to look ahead and smooth these things out and do some real solid financial planning.
Mr. Grasso, any rebuttal?
Yes. Just in terms of reserves, I'm just going to give this quickly because I have 2 points to make. 2015, we had a reserve study. The executive director said we didn't need to do anything with it. 2017, it came in 2018, the same results. The reserves are in good shape. We don't need to do anything. And now we got the reserve study recently that we're trying to address. The second thing, in terms of Freeman Brook, those who've been here a while would understand this has been going on for 10 years, and we've been trying to work with the town and the country club to make something happen. This is an immediate problem of erosion that is causing a problem with the unit owners. So we had to do what we did.
That's your time. All right.
Sorry.
Mr. Seba, do you want to say anything further? 30 seconds if you'd like to.
No, it's just a curious thing.
Can't hear you.
I look at things and I read things, I have a lot of questions. I noticed that the town of Stratford, in their capital budget since 2021, has had at least $450,000 allocated for Freeman's Brook underneath Oronoque Lane. I'm not exactly sure why it wasn't utilized because it's still in the capital budget today. But this is just some of the questions. And I agree, it's a serious drainage problem, had to be addressed. I have no problem with that.
Thank you. That's time for both of you. Question 2 goes to Mr. Sabo first. What do you believe are the top areas of risk in the capital reserve plan, and what would you recommend to mitigate or remediate that risk?
Well, the capital risk area. Mike stopped.
Yeah.
It covers both the tax district and the AVCA activities as well, right? So the critical things are roads, the very critical things are roofs, right? And then there's other infrastructure. So it's hard to say which one's the most critical, but I would pick the roads and roofs. If you look at the studies that were done, right? There was one done in 2015, one done in 2018. The 2018 one said our reserves were not adequate. I just don't know why it took 6 years for someone to, even if the executive director said it, why did it take 6 years to kind of say, hey, let's look at the reserves? I mean, I think that's the valid question. If you look at the reserves specifically, and if you look at, again, there's a lot of great best practices out there, Community Associations Institute, for example. No one funds it fully with their component method. It's just too expensive for most associations. But when you're getting down to 30%, a lot of people say that's a warning sign. We were at 26% in the last study. I know Joe mentioned that we think the reserves are adequate. I would say they're not, based on everything I've read about not threshold funding, but the ideal percentage of what your capital needs will be and what best practices for reserve studies are. If you look at the Federal Housing Administration, they say you should fund every year 10% of your operating budget towards reserves. Now, we don't have a lot of FHA loans, but that's just another standard we can look at to say, hey, our reserves are adequate or not.
All right, Mr. Grasso, same question.
Yeah, what Bob mentioned is all good and it's all theoretical, but in reality, even though we probably should have done something in the past with the executive directors, the fact of the matter is we haven't had an issue. In fact, in terms of the roofs, we're at about $700,000 in funding right now, and the initial look at the roof study plan says that the risk is probably somewhere less than 5% for any immediate need. I'll give one example, that this past little microburst that we had about a month ago, I called maintenance and just asked Lisa how many work orders did she got. She got 130. How many were related to the roofs? About 30. How many were anything significant in terms of roof leaks? They had some leaks, but nothing was bad. They were basically nail pops. So I'm not trying to dismiss it, but I'm not also trying to say the sky is falling. We all know we need to add to the reserves, and we'll do that in a pragmatic, judicious manner. Thank you.
Mr. Sabo, anything further on this?
Yeah, I looked at the roof reserve in particular, and we're doing fine until fiscal year 28, when the balance in the reserve fund for roofs goes below zero. okay? So if you're looking ahead and planning these things, that's something you want to address. You can't separate a reserve, looking at reserves from true long-term fiscal.
Mr. Grasso?
Yeah, he's assuming that sheet of paper is accurate and it's real. It was a plan that was probably put together. I'm not familiar with the details, but I can't believe sitting here in all the years I've been involved that we're going to look at the reserves on the roof to be 0 in 3 years from now. So it's just not a real position to take, and I'm not going to take that. Thank you.
All right. Next question goes to Mr. Grasso first. Would you support a bylaw change in limiting any officer to two-year terms, could be consecutive or non-consecutive, but no more than 4 years total?
Well, that was my question, huh? Okay. I think that, I understand where it's coming from. I've been in office a long time. I've served on both tax districts. I started from the grassroots. I was just a director on the tax district for 5 years. I worked my way to treasurer, then to president. And then while I was president, there were a number of people in this room that came to me and said, we need a change on the AFCA side. Can you please run? So I was more than happy to run, and I ran for a couple of terms. So what I'm saying is, yeah, probably theoretically that might not be a bad idea, but I don't think you want to limit somebody who really has the experience, the talent, and really the people in the village that want you. So the best way to do that and implement that is to vote. Thank you.
Mr. Sabo?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly.
I was trying to figure through, that's why.
Would you support a bylaw change?
Oh, okay.
All right, requiring any officer to serve up to two-year terms, consecutive or non-consecutive, but no more than 4 years?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we have term limits for a reason. There's many ways to serve the community, like Bob just mentioned. You can be on the board, you could be on committees, you could be a district rep. But I don't think there's any reason someone needs to have more than 4 years as president. A new person brings a new perspective. They bring new ideas, a new way of doing things, a fresh look at things. And I think that's important. I mean, that's the kind of the essence of term limits, basically, to get some fresh ideas in it, to keep people from pretty much doing the same thing over and over again, right? So yeah, I agree with it.
All right, any extension?
I do. Fresh ideas, like was mentioned earlier, can come at any level. You can just be a resident and show up and bring your fresh ideas. And I haven't heard what they are yet, but I'm hoping to hear about those. Secondly, I don't want to get into the real serious politics, but I think Myrna kind of laid it out why I came back. I wasn't looking to come back to run again. The village was a little bit off the rails in 2022, and I got asked to come back to help get it back on the rails. Thank you.
Okay, anything further, Mr. Sabo?
No.
All right, thank you. Next question goes to Mr. Sabo first. What are your thoughts about the benefits and costs of using our current on-site management as opposed to a community management company to manage day-to-day operations of the village?
Well, I think we do have a professional manager. I mean, I'm not sure of it's situational of what's better, a professional management company versus the situation we have now with a professional manager, executive director, and the staff we have. So it's a hard question to answer. I mean, when I was a town manager, there were people who used to have town managers and voted them out and got a mayor, something different. They changed the charter. But it was usually situational. I think in our situation, I don't see how paying, and we probably would pay more, I don't see how paying more for a professional manager right now would make things different than they are now. The real thing is to work with our professional staff and outside advisors to make sure that things are being done properly and these people are allowed to do their job.
Same question, Mr. Grasso?
Yeah, I, in general, and somewhat in alignment with Bob, I feel that outside third-party contractors coming in just will take a while to learn the culture and how the place is run, just like hiring another person. You know, I think we are blessed and very fortunate that we implemented a succession plan. Mark started as a supervisor in the carpentry. We brought him over to the maintenance department, and we brought him up here. I just can't tell you how valuable I think having that in our hands right now is. I think it's unbelievable. And I said this the other day at my meet and greet that, you know, I did a lot of coaching in sports, and one thing, I had kids at all different skill levels. But one thing you can't coach or teach. You can't coach heart into a kid. Mark's got it.
All right, anything further? Mr.
I agree with what he just said.
Anything further, Mr. Grasso? All right, thank you. Next question goes to Mr. Grasso first. Where specifically do you believe we can make improvements to the maintenance and operating costs and service policies?
Okay, that was in the, kind of what I said in the first question was the efficiency and with the maintenance department. I think maintenance is the engine that runs this place. I mean, the calls that I get or emails that I get, I'm sure that Mark and his group get, they're always centered around maintenance. I can't tell you, I can't almost go to an event without somebody coming up to me and saying, you got a minute? It's either grass on your sidewalk, or they didn't do a great job trimming the tree, or when did they come in? So I think we need to really focus on that. And Mark and I talked about that in the spring, and we're going to take a hard look at some of the things we can do to make those efficiencies better. Part of the problem is, as we talked earlier too, is staffing, and part of the thing is, you know, we got Limos now for an example. Making a transition to an outside contractor, on paper looks good, and it was good, but making that synergistic between that contractor and the maintenance department is still something that we have to work on and improve, and we will, and it's going to happen.
Mr. Sabo?
I agree. I believe that it should have been sooner. There was still some issue. I hear a lot of things that Bob just mentioned too. You know, why was my leaves not picked up until February? How come there's debris lying on the road for a week? You know, and I'm sure it's very common. But we had trouble getting people, which means we had a surplus in the in-house labor account. We spent just a little bit more in contracted labor. I mean, the good thing about contracted labor, it's elastic. If you need more services, you basically look at the rates in the contract and you get more services, okay? So that balance between in-house services from our staff and contracted labor, to me, is one of the keys to solving this problem, right? So we have to look at every contract, every service, and accommodate the needs as they arise, not, you know, when we get around to it, okay? So that's the one thing. I think the second thing is, this gets one of my points later on about technology. There are systems out there with work order systems and management systems. And I'm sure you've all seen a service person come to your house with a keypad, right? And he looks at the job, he estimates the job, he tells them how long it took, he enters it into the system, they tell him, okay, your next job is over here. That's just technology, okay? So I'm saying that kind of technology and all the technology we use to run the place should be looked at. So when you look at contract labor, when you look at in-house labor, when you look at the technology that supports them, that's the kind of effort that has to happen in order to improve the situation.
Mr. Grasso, do you want to say anything further?
Yeah, just want to make one point. I mean, basically what Bob just added to what I had said, I don't terribly disagree with. The only point I'm going to make is that staffing is an issue across all industries. So it's not like going to the deli and going up and saying, give me another slice of bologna. You just can't go out and find people. And Limos is having that same kind of an issue. So theoretically that's true, and we're going to take a hard look at how to do that. And technology-wise, some of the things have been improved. We can also take another second look at it to what Bob's saying, I agree.
Mr. Sabo, anything further?
Yeah, I agree with Bob. There is a labor shortage. It's not just here, it's nationally. Right? But when you're faced with a labor shortage and you have to get a job done, what do? You try to hire people any way you can, whether it's through a contractor or additional in-house resources, and get it done. And I think that's what has to be done.
Okay, thank you both. Next question goes to Mr. Sabo first. What strategies would you employ to broaden the participation and engagement of Oronoque Village residents, both new and established, with the overall decision-making process here in the village?
Well, what do you think about that one? I think there's a lot of people involved, and let's face it, the people who serve on boards and commissions and district reps and clubs, they're the lifeblood of this place. I think I mentioned it when I was at my meet and greet. One of the first things I realized as a town manager was the value that these people bring. But in order to do it, you got to do a couple of things. Number one is you have to have a channel for them to openly communicate, not just in a formal way, but an informal way. So we could have things like, office hours. That's also one of the things that the CIO recommends. So you have a board member or the president, once or twice a month, sit there for 2 hours. Anybody can come in. Anybody could ask anything, right? Give you suggestions, give you ideas. Number two is, I think we can really do a better job of appreciating our volunteers. I mean, I don't care, an annual Christmas party just for the volunteers, the volunteer of the month in the Villager. I just think you constantly have to recognize the value that these people provide and think of ways to basically let them know you value that commitment.
Mr. Grasso?
Sure. 2 years ago, one of the first things I did was I put out a letter to everyone in the village. And I basically asked everybody on a standing committee to resign. And if they like to reapply, they can reapply. And I opened it up to the entire village. That was a pretty tedious process that we went through. And we wound up having a 40% turnover with new faces on committees. That's the good news. The tough news was there were a few close friends that had been on the committees for a very long time, and I had to make have those conversations too. And I got to say, initially, some of those people were upset and shocked, but after thinking about it in retrospect, I think they accepted it to move along and let somebody else have a chance. So those are the things that I think a lot of people just don't realize what happens. And what Myrna's talking about, that was another perfect opportunity. This strategic planning committee was an outstanding idea, but it also to help the village go forward. But it also got a lot of new people involved to bring ideas forward rather than holding them. So you have a voice and an opportunity to bring them. And Myrna is doing a job handling that right now. So I am very happy where that is, and I plan on doing the same thing if I'm elected.
Mr. Sabo, any rebuttal or extension?
Yeah. One of the things I would do as a new president is spend the first month or so talking to everybody, just getting their input. So before I went ahead and said, hey, resign, I would get input from all the existing people, board members, committee members, and so on, just to get a feel for what their concerns and thoughts are. And I wouldn't make any wholesale changes in those positions until I did that.
All right, Mr. Grasso, anything further?
I'm good.
Thank you both. Next question goes to Mr. Grasso first. How would you develop an increasingly positive relationship between OVCA and the Oronoque employees to enhance the sense of appreciation of the employees?
Just say that last part one more time.
How would you develop an increasingly positive relationship that would enhance a sense of appreciation of the employees?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, everybody here knows that we have the employee appreciation funds that we do around the holidays. And there's always a drive with certain residents that I'm thankful for that try to help push that. And some of the things that we do there, beyond that, in terms of what Mark does, we have a couple of the building days where they can go out and have a little gathering, team building gatherings. And those are the kinds of things that we've encouraged over the last few years, and I want to continue to do that. But since I mentioned the Employee Appreciation Fund, it is, I gotta say, I got a good audience here, it is a little disappointing that we stay at a level that's in the mid-30s every year. Sometimes we might hit 40%, sometimes it's 38%. And that's a message to all you out there to, if you haven't, or you got neighbors, to please consider that coming up in the next 90 days. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sable?
I agree. Your employees help make this place run. When I was a town manager, I'd go down to the public works garage and hang around and talk to people. What's going on? I'd go to the fire department, do the same thing. So yeah, it's important to recognize the people, show them you appreciate them, but it's also important to listen to what they have to say. And I'm not saying going around managing to do that. You have to be careful of that. But just, listen to people and what they have to say. But I totally agree with Bob on that subject.
All right, anything further, Mr. Grasso? All right, anything further, Mr. Sabo? All right, next question goes to Mr. Sabo first. What do you believe is the single biggest component of Oronoque life that could be improved for the residents?
My wife and I, we looked at a lot of different places before we moved here. I mean, all over the place too. And one of the things that attracted us here was the social life. We moved out of our town, which everybody else does when their kids get out of high school, and we came here. And since we never regretted it, right? So I think, and Myrna mentioned it before too, social interaction, those kind of things. We were talking, I was also talking to Myrna about health and wellness activities. So those kind of social activities, service activities, I mean, to me, they're the lifeblood of the community. But also, we got to be open to new ideas too. I mean, we can't just say no to every new club or any idea that has to come along. You have to consider it. Okay. Is it a liability issue? Well, maybe we could do something about that. If you want to, I tried to start an outdoor club, right? And they said, nope, liability. Well, I just did it informally, but still, that's just an example. I think we have to look at every opportunity to not only enhance the existing activities, but to look at new ones. I mean, we're a diverse community. We have people who are 55 who can run a half marathon, and we have people in their 90s who might be a little more sedate about such things, okay? So there was a proposal for a shuffleboard court, right? Which I'm not sure exactly why it didn't happen, but that might appeal to certain people who don't want to play tennis or pickleball. So I think we have to look at the needs of all the different groups we have here, and I think we have to be open to any new activities or clubs or anything else that might come along. But I do say, like I said right from the start, that that's what attracted us to this place, all the activities and social activities.
All right, Mr. Grasso.
I'm very happy to say that I'm happy that Mr. Sabo spent a very, very long time investigating all the condos in the area and came back with the results coming back that the amenities here and the life here is great. So thank you for that, Bob, because a lot of us have worked hard to keep it that way. Organically, I think that clubs come up, and there's lots of clubs, and I think sometimes they're overlapping in terms of what they do, and that's a kind of a challenge for the office and for, I'll say, Cheryl Dwyer, who's the chair of the House Committee. So I think it's an awesome problem that we have, and I'll say God bless Kathy Stevens, because she has to deal with all of us in trying to manage that calendar and what's available and what's not available. That's an awesome problem to have. That just shows how dynamic and diverse we are with these things. So I would say, anybody have an idea? Bring it to the office, bring it to the House Committee with a club, and we'll see how that fits in, and we would support it the best we can. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Sabo?
Nope.
Anything further, Mr. Grasso?
No, we're good.
All right. Next question goes to Mr. Grasso first. What recommendations would you offer to improve the process of making revisions to the Oronoque Village Declaration, bylaws, or rules and regulations?
Can you, what was it, just the beginning part?
All right. What recommendations would you offer to improve the process of making revisions to the Oronoque Village Declaration, bylaws, rules, and regs?
Okay, declarations have been updated, just for those who don't know, 2008, 2016, 2019, and 2024. When I came back in office in 2022, there were 22 items on that list that the committee was taking a look at, and that quickly grew to a number of other items. So the process is somewhat, I'll say, driven by residents who want some changes, but it's also statutory changes that have to happen. So those two things came together in this last committee review, but on top of that, the committee came back and said, there are so many changes that when you read them, Article 4, they say one word and it's a different reference in Article 2. So there was lots of cleanup that they wanted to do womb to tomb. So I like to believe going forward that that womb to tomb is done once this bylaw gets passed. And going forward, we'll continue doing what we were doing in the past. Document statutory changes that have to be modified and take input from the residents and board members who want to make a certain change.
All right, Mr. Sabo.
Yeah, the bylaws changes. It's a big job, and the people who worked on it worked really hard to get it done, which is laudable. But there were a lot of changes there. If anybody had read the red line document and the other document, there was a 60-page summary, which to me isn't quite a summary. So I'm not saying that it's not needed. I have some issue with some of the items in it, but I just
Mike's off again.
I just think it can be communicated a lot better. I would have liked to see is, I take a break. Can you stop time? This is like, the light keeps cutting out. There you go.
Thank you.
Hey, Bob. Okay. So what was I saying? So I think what should have been done is a concise summary that says, hey, listen, these are the statutory changes to comply with state statutes. And here's, you know, and if anybody wants the details, they can look into the more detailed documents. Here are the ones that are language changes. You know, we're changing effect to effect. That's just a cleaner. I mean, there's things like that. But there are some that are substantial and, as the orders would say, material, right, to the run. Like allowing compensation in certain cases to people who provide a service for the board, right? Shortening the time of notice for special board meetings. Right? So there's a lot of questions I had, and I'm sure a lot of you read those documents and probably felt the same way I did. You know, what? Couldn't it have been explained a little better? That was my concern.
All right, Mr. Grasso, anything further on that?
Sure, I'll make a comment. Yeah, I mean, it was a womb to tomb change, and I understand you had to have a little bit of intestinal fortitude to go through it, and I agree. But the way they put the summaries together, they had kind of a very top piece, which is like an executive summary, and then they had details below that. So I think it was really well done. And I'm just going to say that between June 11th and by the time we went to the unit owner meeting, August 15th, there was at least 8 different meetings that you could have attended. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Sabo? Yeah, that might be.
So, you know, it was funny. I spent a lot of time looking through all the documents that were posted to the Oronoque website, right? And there was, I think, minutes for one of the meetings was just posted. I mean, Bob said the other day that, oh, you don't have to come to the meetings because the minutes are so good. Well, the minutes weren't so good in some areas, and that was the issue that I had.
All right, thank you both. This is going to be the last question, and given the mic failure, I think we're about at the end. This goes to Mr. Sabo first. Based on the results of the current reserve study, what would be your short-term and long-term strategies to adequately fund the reserves?
I think and again, it took 6 years, but the board is setting up a process to review it. So number one, I think that continue and has to be done quickly. Number two, it has to be tied in not just how the reserves are funded, but how we look ahead for 5 years and fund all the village and tax district activities. And only after we do that can we determine what the best way to fund it would be. But, you know, I was a public finance professional, and there were certain basics that you follow, right? You don't use capital funds for current operating expenses, right? You have a 5-year capital plan to fund things, whether it's out of the reserve or out of the operating budget, right? So there's some basic principles and best practices that you can do to look ahead. I mean, I doubt if Bob nor Bob, there's two Bobs, I don't think either Bob could really say, well, we're not going to be any increases in the homeowner's fee, or that we just can't say that. What my goal would be is to make it predictable and avoid up and down spikes and avoid assessments.
All right. Mr. Grasso.
Yeah, a couple of things. The last 10 years, and I wasn't in office for all 10 years, just 7 of those 10. But in any event, we averaged probably just a little bit over 3% increase on average for all those years, where the national inflation average was 3.2. So I think we've done a pretty good job doing that. And in terms of the overall, and looking at the reserves, I saw, you know, I think you really have to, like I said before, the devil is in the detail. You have to find out what you really need and what's really critical. Whether it's 26% or 42%, what are those makeup items that are going to get you to that number? That's the critical thing. And the next question is, how do I get there from here to there to do that so we don't impact the village? So I think there's a lot more homework that needs to be done. And my goal is, and Mark knows this too, and so does Diane, that is to have that detail and infinite detail so that we're prepared going into the next budget cycle and we can make that adjustment. And that adjustment could be whatever percent, I don't really know at this point.
All right, any rebuttal, Mr. Sabo?
Well, I'll tell you, if you ever spent time looking at the depreciation factor for a bench that's out by the grill over there and what its useful life is, the details can get kind of boring. But Bob is right, you have to look at those details. All right? I'm not saying you shouldn't, because that's what makes up the report. I'm just saying that we have to tie it in to a real fiscal plan that includes not just reserves, but everything we spend money on and everything we take money in on.
So anything further?
No, it's just the obvious. I mean, that's kind of what I was saying the other day at one of the meetings I was at. You know, there's 3 major things. Bob mentioned a couple of them. He mentioned the roads, which is really tax district, so we don't want to cross funds there, I guess. But I think we need to at times, if we can do that, to help each other out, because I thought we are one village. So to me, that's really the critical thing. And the devil is definitely in the detail. And looking at the big items, the roofs, the roads, the siding, those are the biggies, and outside lighting. Thank you.
Thank you both. At this point, we get to closing statements. Luck of the draw, and Mr. Grasso goes first.
Good evening, and thank you for coming, and to you, Jean, and the League of Women Voters. Some ask, why am I running? I'm an experienced leader who has great insights into the complexities of the village. These include governance, budgeting, village operations, tax district synergy, and village culture. These insights come from all the experience I've gleaned from the years of serving in many positions on both the tax district and AFCA boards, as well as years on 3 core committees: insurance, HR, and budget. And I believe experience does matter. I thoroughly understand the current challenges regarding reserves, roofs, and maintenance. I am confident we can meet these challenges when I am elected. My mission is to develop a comprehensive route plan linked to our reserves, factoring in our reserve study and strategic plans to create a long-term financial plan through 2029, as well as to address maintenance issues. Fortunately, 2 senior financial professionals who are new to the village and have exceptional financial backgrounds and HOA management expertise have joined the Finance Committee. This includes Joe Myers running for the Office of Treasurer. Let's face it, we all want to stretch our dollars in our senior years. I am particularly proud of our financial achievements. I've worked hard to capture cost savings of more than $200,000 between our property and liability insurance, savings, employee and medical insurance. The resident-approved community contribution fee is projected to be approximately $100,000 a year. We're poised to potentially save another $95,000 a year in the town of Stratford tax relief. That's nearly $400,000 in reductions and added revenues. To reiterate, my primary goals are develop a long-range financial plan through 2029, the utilization of the reserve study to address our reserve needs, analyze of the roof and study to develop a feasible plan to brainstorm to enhance maintenance effectivity and efficiency. Importantly, I will invest whatever time is necessary to deliver a better village. I have no learning curve. I've lived here 19 wonderful years. I want to continue to make Oronoque the best place to live in Connecticut by leveraging my OV experience, my depth of knowledge, my determination with the board, committees, management. We will continue to make Oronoque Village the best it can be. That's why experience does matter. Finally, being president has been very gratifying. I see many wonderful friends here tonight, and I've been happy to manage the village for all our benefit. Thank you for entrusting me to lead the board, and I hope you continue to support me. And a special thanks to my bride, Debbie, for her love, patience, and understanding. Thank you for all coming.
Thank you, that's time. Mr. Sept.
Okay. So several people here started, when they started speaking, Myrna mentioned it, Joe mentioned it, sure, about the experience that they had in other places, and they said that as a qualification. So experience is important, but I'm pretty sure there's people in this audience who have had experiences elsewhere that they brought to a new job, a new town, that served them very well. And I'm just talking about minor experiences, like serious knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? So, yeah, there's a learning curve for anyone new to any job, but it's not insurmountable by any means, okay? So you guys have my resume, you can look at that. So, I mean, by now, I recognize all the great work that people have done, and, you know, they've done some good things. But, you know, I'm lost in my thoughts here, okay. But yeah, I mean, there's some great things done, but I believe there are other things that could be better, right? I mean, a president's job isn't, an accomplishment isn't just a job duty. So getting the tax district together and the board together, it's a job duty. It's a basic responsibility. But a president has to do more than that, right? They have to lead. They have to ask questions, all right? I don't have all the answers, but I do have some questions. We talked about the questions on the reserves. We had a study done in 2015, 2018, and all of a sudden it's a big issue that we got to do something about in 2024. The community contribution fee, we had one at one time, 2014 I believe it was. It was declared not viable legally. It's an important thing, and I agree with it, by the way, but why did it take us another 8 years to kind of get it going again? I mean, these are questions I have. I asked questions about the insurance fund, for example. I mean, Bob claimed that they saved $147 million, I believe. I looked at the budget. The budget is higher this year. I know it's a 20-month plan instead of a 12-month plan, but I also know that all of the money for that 20-month plan is not in this year's budget. You have to look at next year's budget. Next year's budget means it might increase. Now, I'm not calling a liar saying, it's a fake number. I just don't know. It should have been communicated. How did we save $36,000 in payroll? I mean, did we let a person go? Did we reduce overtime? These are just questions I have that I would ask if I was in that position, okay? So I have 30 seconds. So, I mean, I think I can bring a lot of fresh perspectives and a lot of fresh ideas to the place, to Oronoque Village, and really make it special. So why am I running? Number one, I feel I can do the job. If there's a learning curve, it's going to be relatively short. And the second thing, I agree that Oronoque Village will benefit from a fresh set of eyes, a new perspective, and some new ideas for the village. So thanks for your support, and vote for Bob this month.
Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates.
Thank you, everyone. Just as a reminder, if you haven't yet, you should be and will be receiving the proxies by mail, either today or tomorrow. All right, that will both include the officer election and the bylaw revision. All right, so just keep that in mind. You're all to go in the return envelope inside that mailing. Just go ahead and put both forms in there. Make sure you sign them, date them, print your name, and send them out. All right, have a good night.